I'm here for you guys. I'm back. A digital mogul. I got a lot of names, but one is definitely the digital mogul. I'm like digitally. I live this. I breathe it. I sleep it. Y'all heard me say it before, especially if you follow me on Instagram at Michael J McDonald. Uh, yeah. Again, I got to get like used to this. And what I realize is the more I do it, the easier it gets. So I wanted to talk to you guys about how to market your podcast, your audio side. We won't talk about video. We're going to talk about audio. So I see like a lot of people, they're trying to promote their podcast and they're trying to promote it on the wrong channels, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on YouTube, even Twitter. I've seen, people promoting those things. And I think about this like mentally, you got to think about what would you do and how would you react to what you're about to do. And if you don't click on Instagram to go to an audio podcast, if you don't click on a YouTube to go to an audio podcast, then you have to think about it, right? There's probably other people like you. So I wanted to talk about that. Like I could think of probably a bunch of ways to market it, but I'm just going to talk about a few ways to market your podcast on audio platforms. What not to do is try to grab someone's attention off of what they are using, the platform they're using. So if I'm using Instagram to promote my audio podcast, then I'm failing before I started because I'm trying to convince somebody that is a visual person that likes to see things, not hear things. And I'm trying to get them off of this platform that they're comfortable with to go consume my content on a whole different platform and consume it in a different way. What I realize is people consume content the way, how should I say this? People like to consume content or new content the way they consume the content that they met you on or they discovered you on. So if I discover Michael McDonald on Instagram, but Michael McDonald has a podcast, Michael McDonald shouldn't promote his audio podcast on Instagram, because if you discover me on Instagram, 9 out of 10 times, you're not going to go to my audio podcast. It's like me. I'm a visual person. I don't really like to listen to audio podcasts. What I do is I'll go to like see what's trending on the audio side, and then I'll find them, because most audio podcasts have a video component or a video platform attached to their audio platform. So I'll find them on audio sometimes, but then I'll go watch the video on their video platform. I don't like to consume audio content unless it's a book. I don't like to read, but I like to listen to the audio, especially when I'm driving on long drives. So I say this: you got an audio podcast, right? There's a couple of ways. One is, if are you a guest on multiple audio podcasts? What you're doing is exposing you to the person's podcast you were on, and they consumed you on the audio platform, and you promoted yourself, hopefully, on this person's audio podcast. They're going to, if they like you, they're going to say, oh, Michael McDonald has an audio podcast as well. He met you on this audio platform. It is a very easily transition to go meet you to consume your content on an audio platform. Does that make sense? So you have to be very, very strategic on marketing your audio podcast, because don't waste money, don't waste time, and don't waste energy trying to get listeners to listen to your audio platform on a visual platform. It won't work. So I say the first thing you got to do is go on more podcasts, be a guest, let people know how great you are. And then you get exposure to their audience, and their audience goes to your podcast. That's one. Two, some platforms, distributor platforms, they actually have a feature called cross-platform advertising. So now I can say, I see John, and he has a similar podcast I like that my audience is about, like kind of like his. So I go, there's a feature in the distribution platform, one called Red Circle, and you can actually say, you get the opportunity to say, hit John up and be like, hey John, can I advertise your podcast on my podcast, and you advertise my podcast on your podcast? So what you'll do is you'll make like a 30-second mid-roll for his podcast, and he'll make one for your podcast, and that's actually free. 9 out of 10 times, if you do cross promotion, and then they tell you like the audience sizes, like the downloads, and if it's similar, it's 9 out of 10 times it's free. It's free. Now, if you want to get one on that has like 10 times your listeners, you can pay, or sometimes they may do it free. It's always good to ask. You don't, it's what all they can say is no. But what it allows you to do is you can get access to 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 of people listening to your podcast with your mid-roll in it. And then you can get exposure to that big audience, even if you have to pay. And the pay is paying, you're paying CPM, so cost per mile. So what you're doing is you're paying, say, $40 per 1,000 listens and so forth, or whatever you pay. So you get on this 10,000 download list podcast, and they'll actually get exposure to 10, 20,000 people. Maybe 5,000 people might come to your podcast. But that's another way to get exposure and to market your audio podcast. Very important. Now, the third way is probably, I would say, my last option, because making a podcast is very expensive, especially if you don't have your own equipment. Now, even if you have your own equipment, but you don't edit, then you need to edit. And if you can edit and have your own equipment, it still takes a lot of time. So a lot of money and time it takes to produce a podcast, right? So I would say the third option, which would be the last option that I would pick out of these three, is pay for advertisement. Now, you can actually go on Spotify, you can go on Apple Podcasts, you can advertise literally on all these. You can pick the podcast you want to advertise on, or you can pay a advertising agency to put you in a diverse podcast portfolio where you can get exposure to thousands and thousands, and you pay a flat fee, and they'll get you on as many podcasts as possible. There's a few ways to do it, but that is the third option, is to pay. And it gives you exposure. It does give you great exposure, because you're getting exposure on the audio side of the world. And 30 seconds to a minute mid-roll, those people will see you and come over to you, and it would help you grow your audio platform. So those are 3 strong ways to grow your audio podcast. I hope you guys took notes, because I think I was dropping some major gems. I was talking for 9 minutes. I'm a 10-minute guy. I'm trying to get to the hour guy, but it takes time. Time will only tell, time and practice. But you guys, I think this will be great for you guys to just practice and do. So if you do have an audio podcast, try doing the first 2 and see how it works for you, and maybe do the third one. What you'll do is you'll actually get momentum and start getting a lot of listeners. But I will say you got to make sure your content is very good. Don't just make content, especially if you're going to market it and pay for it. Don't just make any old content. You got to make some good content. Good content is key. So I thank you guys for rocking with me. I thank you guys for watching me. Like it, subscribe it. I love you guys. God bless.